Expansions. I don't always trust them. Expansions, sometimes they're cool, sometimes they're not. Do we often buy them? Absolutely. But I really like the idea of expansions. I like watching a deleted scene to a movie that you're already familiar with and seeing something different, seeing something from the mind's eye of the director that for one reason or other couldn't make it. Sometimes you get something great that just adds some more context or makes you appreciate things that were left in the film. Other times...
No.
This is not a good time to argue, Master.
Might I recommend?
Other times, you realize, yeah, that didn't need to be there. There's a reason that's not there, but you get it in an expansion. So what do I've got going on? I've got 8 expansions / promos. These promos I think are sizable enough that I actually want to talk about them, and they are generally available from the publishers. But I think that they kind of count as like small expansions in these cases. You'll see what I'm talking about. And if you've not noticed before, we have a separate channel called Dice Tower Encore, where we split these up if you want to watch them in individual discrete videos, more searchable on YouTube that way. But I want to start off with an expansion to a very well-renowned Eurogame. Let's get started with Concordia Solitaria. This is a small expansion for 1 or 2 players. I guess they didn't want to go with the Solitaria for 2 route. But Solitaria is a way that you can play against a computerized opponent, Contrarius, or whatever they call him in here. You can play it solo, or you can play it as a team, as 2 players, against the bot here. In particular, you play cooperatively because this expansion not only has a few dice that kind of help make decisions for the computer player, but also they replace all of the cards you're going to play with. Primarily speaking, in a solo game, you won't use any of the cards in the base game, just the board and the resources. You're moving around the board, building up houses, playing out cards until you choose to do a turn where you recall all of the action cards back into your hand. I love that mechanism. What does this box do? It replaces those cards with cards that have all of the same abilities for you, but feature a little highlighted box that shows Contrarius's actions. So you don't actually run a computer player turn. You take a turn, and based on the card that you play, Contrarius, the Tomabot thing, will react specifically to what you've done. A lot of times it's earning victory points, but a lot of times it can be other things as well, and I really like that. It simulates having a computer opponent without having too much upkeep. That's one of my favorite things in solo modes. You're feeding him points throughout the game, and so you do have a win-loss condition. You are playing directly against a score that you see creeping up around the board. I like that a lot. I think that's really clever. Now, the 2-player mode for this, I haven't played the Concordia Venus expansion, which introduced the idea of playing in teams as 2 players. This is that same type of thing mixed with what I talked about, where the cards will show actions for Contrarius to take. I found, when and I playing that together, I didn't love it because the rules as written say you're not really supposed to communicate. And I think that that's my favorite part of most cooperative games. This isn't like a limited communication game like The Crew, where your actions necessarily speak to your intent. So I found that a little bit odd, but I think that if you enjoyed that team-based mode found in the Venus expansion, this might work really well for you. But for me, I think this is a great solo add-on to the game because Concordia is a game that I have fun playing with. Now, is it something I want to set up on the table? It's kind of a big, sprawling game. I'd rather play with other people. I really would. Or I might first go to the app. Concordia made a very good app recently. But if you are looking for a good solo Euro game like this, win-loss condition, thing that I like looking for, not too much upkeep and management, this one's really good. Rating it as a solo mode, I would give this one an 8.5. I think it's really good. So despite the fact that it might not be the solo mode that I go out to very often, I think it's really good for it to be there to scratch that itch. So that is Concordia Solitaria. Terminal Velocity. This expansion for Jump Drive comes in the same size box as Jump Drive. Costs nearly as much as Jump Drive. Does not give you nearly as much stuff as Jump Drive. Jump Drive is a great little game set in the Race for the Galaxy universe that plays even quicker. It's even simpler. So Terminal Velocity says, hey, what if we took some of those ideas from Race for the Galaxy and put them into our simpler game? It comes in a box this big, and it doesn't need to. And that's fine. That's not a major complaint or anything. But I've got an issue in the fact that there's 3 modules in here, all of which feel very slight, and all of which don't really feel worth the price. The first module is a solo mode that you can play. You play basically 3 games of Jump Drive by yourself, and you're trying to complete one of 3 goals on the card. If you complete one of the 3 goals there, you take a little marker and you set it on there. And then you play a second game just by yourself, and then you're trying to complete one of the 2 remaining ones, and then the last one, if you succeed, you have to complete that last thing. And they have increasing levels of difficulty. I think that's smart, that's well done, but it's so... For me, it wasn't rewarding to play against. I like that win-loss condition. As soon as you don't succeed at one of the remaining goals on that card, you're done. But then also feels like, well, now I have to shuffle up and play again, like the whole thing again? It's okay. It's so slight. The next thing in here is starting worlds. Starting worlds are just basically a card that'll sit in front of you and make you a little bit more distinct from the other players at the table. That's the first turn of Jump Drive. You basically skipped 1 turn. I am all for these, I refer to them as like Terraforming Mars Prelude-like expansions that make you even a little bit more different. They kind of speed up the engine that you got. But that's that's like skipping 1 turn. The game's not that long. It's very quick already. And so, sure, does it bypass that like first turn where you're not really doing much? Sure. But I want to skip the first round of Terraforming Mars and get to the interesting stuff. Or Underwater Cities. That expansion was great. This one, the Starting Planets, that's fine. It gives you a little bit of a starting direction. So maybe it's not bad for starting players, actually. That might be the best part of it. Now, the last module in here is the goals cards. You're racing to complete different goals out on the center of the table. Also fine. Just fine, I found. I think that this is... This isn't a game where I'm sitting there going like, oh yeah, I got to race to be the first person to have 4 green alienoid planet type things. Woof, I beat Jonathan to the case. Yeah, buddy. I get that reward. I like the rewards for completing the goals. Just the race aspect of it, it doesn't feel that enticing to me, especially because the draw of the cards is as random as it is in this game. Something I like. It's a feature of the basic Jump Drive, but I don't find any of these expansion modules really that well worth it, and I didn't care for the solo. I'm going to play other games solo first. So, in terms of like rating, I think the quality of stuff in here is pretty good, but I'm going to give it a 6 overall. I think it's just okay. I would not rush out and buy this one personally, especially at the price point it's at. I don't mention price point very often in reviews, but when I feel like you're really not getting much for what you're paying, I think that's a worthwhile discussion. So that's Terminal Velocity, the expansion for Jump Drive. I've got here some promos for Sushi Go Party. Sushi Go Party is one of my favorite games. Very simple, beautifully simple card drafting game that just works well for families, works well for gamers, plays up to a lot of players. I think that it has so many things going right for it. And one of the things I've always wanted is an expansion for it. I've wanted more content. And so you can go through GameRight and you can purchase, or on the Board Game Geek store, you can purchase little promo packs. So for example, this one here is the Sake. It's worth 3 points, but the next card that you grab from the next hand passed your way, you have to take a random card. I like that. I really do. It's riskier in certain setups, and I think that this works really well in that ecosystem that is Sushi Go Party, because sometimes some of those cards you've played with are riskier to get too many of or too few of, or you don't want one and no more, and therefore having a card like this Sake in the mix is just fun, and I think it makes it disarms players who are playing it. So I think it works really well whether you're trying to play with a serious group or it fits right in if you're playing with like a family of like not so serious, not taking the game so seriously, which you shouldn't anyway. Next up here is the Sukaroku. This little promo here. Each of these promos are $5, by the way, which if you factor that against the cost of the original game, it seems like a lot. But I like what each one of these adds, just having a few more. So having one new appetizer. So for example, with this one here, you're trying to, these are each worth 2 points. If you make a pair of the 2 different symbols, that's worth 6 points instead. So simple, fits right in with the rest of these, and I like that. And then the last one here, brings in the dreaded math. But the inari appetizer here, you'll notice there are two different symbols. There's the rice-topped ones and the seaweed-topped ones. And at the end of the round, you're going to multiply the number of rice ones times the number of the seaweed ones. You might get a bunch of cards all the same type and have almost no multiplier. You might get almost none of these. You might get several of these, and I think that that's a fun thing to chase. It's worth chasing, I think. So like I said, each of these little promo it feels like a small little expansion. Pay 10, 15 bucks to get a few of them like I did, and you haven't doubled the content in Sushi Go Party, but what you have done is allowed more permutations, more mixes of the different things together. I really like that. I do find that to be worth it because I play Sushi Go Party a lot, and so having these in the mix was really nice. Now, one of the things that I noted when I did a pile of Phil Walker Harding reviews, and one of the things that we talked about this was that the cut of the cards didn't fit the cut of our copy of Sushi Go Party perfectly. I was really disappointed with that. That being said, they're easy enough to kind of work around, and I'm not sitting there looking at the height of cards to compare how to strategically draft cards necessarily. So that's not what this is about. It is harder to shuffle, but we did get a comment that said that they bought a newer printing of Sushi Go Party, and these promo cards lined up with those. So something I wanted to note, your mileage may vary on that, but I really like these promos. If I were to give them a rating, I would, value for dollar, it's not a ton, but ultimately I really like what's going on. Sushi Go Party, very highly rated for me. So promos, eights, maybe, a good score, really good score, definitely recommend them. So that's the promos for Sushi Go Party. There's some little promo mini expansions for Dragon Prince Battlecharged. You ever played it? Of course you haven't. Very few people have. This is a game that I championed. I gave this one an 8 when I reviewed it over a year ago. I thought that this one was really good. It's kind of an unmatched style game where you're playing head-to-head primarily. You can play with 3-4 players, I suppose, but you can play head-to-head primarily as different characters. You're moving around a board and doing attacks and trying to block and react and stuff. I don't always love this genre of game. I have an affinity towards the TV show it's based off of, but I really like this show a lot. I really like this game. I have a lot of fun with it. The thing is that it didn't have any expansions come out in the year or so since I've played it, but there's 2 little ones that I'm going to be taking a look at here. The first of which are 16 extra cards that you can mix in with the 8 characters. So 2 extra cards per character. This one's called the Season 5 16 card expansion pack. I really like Season 5 of the show, and it's fun to see some of the art of the characters having matured and grown up a little bit. They fit in really well. The cut and print of the cards looks the same, so I appreciate that little detail here. It has some new cards no new types or anything like that, but it gives some characters who didn't have ongoing effect cards an ongoing effect card. One that can sit out and play and allow them to get more charges, the currency of the game, at their leisure. Or it can interact with some of the cards they've already had in there. I think that just having a few extra cards per character is fine. If I were to rate this pack, it's not that expensive, and it's just a little more variety in your decks. You pick 2 characters, shuffle their decks together. So having a little more variety, that's fun. And I like the effects. And I like that they all speak to all the different characters, and they make me think of moments in the newest season of the show. I'm going to give this a 7, I think. I think the value's okay on it. However, the Nether expansion, a little promo they've had, is a whole new character. This is Dark Callum, or Corrupted Mage Callum. So Callum is one of the 8 sculpts in the original game, and he comes with his own deck of cards. So this is basically, you can use the same sculpt, and you can play with an alternate version of Callum. I really like this type of expansion. You didn't have to sell me a new miniature. You just sold me a little wrapped pack of cards like this. I think that's great. A whole different character who behaves a little differently, has a difficult time charging up cards, forcing you to discard cards from hand at the beginning of your turn to get those charges. But there's some really fun cards in here that allow you to get charges by siphoning energy and charges from your teammate or from other players. Or there's one in here where you react to your teammate getting hurt and you get like 4 out of your 5 charges all at once. I think that's great. This is very fun. And the best part about this is that it has the dark magic type. There are 2 characters in the base box who have the dark magic type. And I think that there's the opportunity that either Dark Mage can play a dark magic card, even if it belongs to a different character. A lot of these cards are more character specific. This allows a 3rd mage that you can interchange those cards with. That's really clever. That's really good. Not so much clever. It's just more interchangeability, which is what this game kind of thrives on. And there's also a card here where Callum, Dark Mage Callum, can take a card from any discard pile that uses the dark magic and play it for its effect. Meaning he can replay some of his own cards, which are stronger if you pull them out of your discard pile. Or if you're playing against, say, Viren, you can say, I'm going to learn your spell and cast it right back at you. This is essentially having a 9th character in the game. I think this one is very much worth it, so I give Dragon Prince an 8. I would also give this little extra 1 character pack an 8 as well. Mountain Goats is a great little dice-chucking game from Allplay that I really enjoy. Allplay being one of our premier sponsors here on the channel. So this is a little extra module that you can buy, a little promo or expansion, I guess you would call it. It feels so small and slight, but also Mountain Goats is a very small and slight game. In that game, you roll 4 dice and you're trying to move goats up different mountain numbers, right? A little bit like Can't Stop or one of those types of games. And so the expansion here gives you green goats to work with, so you can play with up to 5 players, or you can play with green goats, because who doesn't want that? But on the other side here are these 2 little cards that you put next to each other, and this is kind of an alternate action you can do. Rather than rolling to move your goats up the normal paths and try and get to the top and score the normal way, you can take one of your goats off of any of the areas or in front of you, and you move them to a space on here that matches the total of all 4 dice that you rolled. If you roll really high, you can earn a lot of points by having the highest goat on this side mountain over on the side of the main board. You take that goat and it's gone. You will not, I mean, you can pull it back, of course, right? But like otherwise, it's just gone. It's not moving up the normal paths and scoring points. You're just setting it to the side because you want to try and make it the highest up there. It's a little bit of like a area majority type of, not area majority, but just, yeah, majorities type of a game on the side. I like that. I really dig that little extra bit to it. That being said, I don't think it's necessary. The base game is so good, and I almost don't want to teach a whole extra mechanism when I teach that simple and pure and good of a game. Really like Mountain Goats. I gave the original an 8. This one, I think it's good, but it's not one that I'm going to pull out every time because I just want to teach that basic game so simple and fast. I guess if my group has played Mountain Goats a lot, this is nice variety for it. And I like the green goats, but overall I'm going to give this one a 7. I still recommend it. I think that, you know, if that's a game that you're going to pull out often, this is just some more nice extra little thing to it that's not too difficult. But I just kind of, I'll just have fun teaching the original. So that's the Mountain Goats expansion. Allplay will often do these little expansion packs here for their small box games. It makes sense the expansion would be as small as it is. This is the one for sale called the Seafarers expansion here. This is for a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game that I enjoyed. Allplay being one of our sponsors, of course, but I still give the game a 7.5. I like trick-taking. I like the ideas of mixing it up so that's cooperative. But one of the things that I said about the game, I wish that there was almost a little bit more on the map. I kind of wish there was like 1 or 2 other little things.
Ooh, you run into a whirlpool.
Definitely see like, oh, he sailed into a little atoll, and I can pass a card to you and you give me one back.
And so there's a tile on here when you hit it, you trade a card with your partner. Or there's a whirlpool. When you move into it, you move an extra space in the same direction that you were moving. That's huge. That potentially is really big, especially if you earn one of those move in a big straight line across instead of like diagonally kind of each way. And so getting functionally 4 moves instead of 2 moves instead of 1 move, like that's really good. This is kind of the variety that I was hoping for. Plus, in here is a little fold out that has 5 more map setups that use these new tokens in there, but then they also just feel more different. Instantly, when I set up the first one, the first of the 5 maps in here, I was like, got it. This behaves more differently than the base maps that came in the original box of sale. So I'm bumping my score of sale from a 7.5 up to an 8 with this, because I think that this is really good. If you enjoy little trick-taking games, co-op 2-player, Sail is a good one to have in your collection, but I would also recommend getting this one pretty quick because I think that that's going to make some more variety and make it more likely to hit your table a bit more. So that's my thoughts on the Sail Seafarers expansion. And now we're going to end with this. City of Crowns for Paladins of the West Kingdom. This is a juicy expansion here. I really like the basic game, of course. It is in my top 10 games of all time. I believe it's still in the top 10, if not the top 20. No, it's definitely in the top 10. And so this is a review that I thought I did. Mike and I and Wendy have played this expansion together. Mike and I thought that we filmed an expansion review of it. We didn't. It's one of those Mandela effect kind of moments where we could have sworn that we did it. We scrubbed up and down the channel looking for it. We never did it. I don't know why. I apologize to Garfield Games. This review is like a year overdue. I really like the City of Crowns expansion. The Paladins of the West Kingdom is one of those smooth games. I hadn't played it in a while. I pulled it out, set it on the table, and I thought, I know all the rules. Like, I know all of them. It's just that smooth and great of a game. This expansion does introduce a few more wrinkles to it. There's a little more setup. That middle area of the board is even a little bit longer. It has got a big, long board right across the middle there. It adds a few different cards that I like how they work with. There's 2 new actions. I thought, ooh, how is that going to mess with the smoothness of the action economy of the game? Everything has a nice way of feeding into the other actions, and yet you want to specialize in a single thing. This expansion still allows the game to do that. And I was very impressed with it. Having 2 extra actions didn't mess up the flow of things. You could lean into them, and you could lean into them pretty hard and do very well with it, or you can just kind of dabble in it when the opportunity presents itself. Having new cards that you can put workers onto to activate them, that's nice. But then the workers that you put on those cards in the middle, they might get purchased, and you've just given a free worker to another player. You see little things where, I think as they were developing the future series of games, like the Wayfarers of the South Tigris, you see little aspects and elements of that in here without it feeling too familiar. I really like that. There's a 4th tracker to move up, and you can still balance the 4 different types of tracks very well. There are new Paladins you add in, and you introduce a tough new mechanism where at the start of each round you have 4 Paladins in hand. You choose one of them for the tracks and for the workers and for the power. You play one. You put one on top of your deck. You put one on the bottom of the deck. And you remove the 4th one from the game. That's a slight new little change compared to how it plays in the base game. That feeling of having to get rid of one from the game is sometimes gut-wrenching. And that's a good type of difficult decision to have to make in a game like this because Paladins gives you so much. So having an expansion that asks a little bit more of you, I feel like is worth it. Now, is this a must-buy expansion? I don't think so. I say that very cautiously because I also rate it very highly. I would rate this a 9. I think that this expansion, what it does is phenomenal. For me, a person who has played Paladins of the West Kingdom well over 10 times. And maybe that doesn't sound like a whole lot to some people, but for me, and in this job and in this position, a lot of my favorite games, I'm hoping to get them played 10 times. In the time that I've played Paladins, and it doesn't always necessarily happen that way, but this is a game that I keep coming back to. I will throw the expansion in because I already know the flow of the basic game so well. This is one that if you're picking up Paladins for the first time, and you could buy this expansion, or maybe you buy the big box where it comes folded in, play the base game several times, fall in love with it, then add this in so that those extra wrinkles aren't as difficult to get into. It doesn't feel like yet another mechanism because you know the core system so well, but also because I do think that it's more rewarding when you know the ecosystem of the basic game really well. So that's my only little hesitation there, is if you're like a first-time player of Paladins, I would not throw this expansion in there necessarily. I would probably advise against it. I'm sure that there are plenty of people who have played it with it and said, this is great either way, but I think that you get more from it when you know the basic game. So still a 9 from me. I think that this expansion is wonderful and I really like it. And so here it is, even if it's a year late and $365 short. But that's my thoughts on all of these expansions here. I hope that was a worthwhile review for you. Thanks for coming by this Rapid Fire Roundup. Oops! All Expansions edition. My name's Chris Yee. Thanks for coming by the Dice Tower.